My sister begged me to rejoin our toxic family because she and her little daughter needed help. I agreed, thinking things had changed. But when I arrived home, my mom revealed it was all a strategy to make me pay for everything. I, 19 female, grew up really poor, seriously poor. My dad lost his job during mass layoffs in his company just a few months after my older sister, Stella, fake name, 24 female, was born, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom, so she never had any money of her own to begin with. He took up another job, but it paid significantly less. That's where the struggle began apparently, and then 5 years later, I was born. It was made clear to me from a really young age that I wasn't wanted in the family because I was an accident, and the only reason my mother had decided to keep me was because she believed that terminating the pregnancy would have been the wrong thing to do. So I was born into poverty, and I lived in a house where my parents had one room and my sister and I had to share the pull-out couch at night. To say that my family was toxic would be an understatement. Not just my parents but also their relatives would treat me like a second-class citizen in my own house, so it never really felt like my own home. I tried hard to get them to notice me and be proud of me, but nothing was ever enough. Stella was the star, and she was the one who had all the hopes and dreams of the family pinned on her. But to put it bluntly, she really didn't work half as hard as I did, so her grades weren't that great either. Despite that, she was the star, and I was a nobody simply because my parents just refused to look at me as anything other than a burden. There was another person who was treated the same way by my family, and that was my cousin Sam. He had a good few years with me, almost 8, and yet he was treated just like I was, which made me realize that my family's behavior wouldn't change with time. He was my maternal aunt's son, who had lost her husband to a heart attack when he was young and was living off of whatever he'd left her. She hated Sam because he couldn't hold down a job for more than 3 months because he was always too distracted and lost. I can't blame the guy because he was a musical genius, and I actually really liked Sam because despite being so much older than me, he treated me with respect and would talk to me like an adult. Whenever my aunt would come over, we would talk to each other and try to forget the fact that our families hated us. It was nice to spend time with him, and even though Stella didn't get us, she tried to be a part of our little circle as well. So, growing up, it was the 3 of us, but eventually, Stella started staying out with her friends from school more and more, and we saw less of her. My mistreatment continued and even got worse when Stella was supposed to go to college, and my mother realized that she'd have to attend her safety school because her first choice was too expensive. This was somehow my fault, and I got an earful because of that. But when I tried to defend myself, my mother actually slapped me right across the face and nobody said anything about it. I'd been hit before, but they'd just be little raps on the knuckles or a slap on the back of my head if I wasn't paying attention, never a full-blown slap. So that was shocking for me, but I learned to keep my mouth shut after that. I was 13 at the time, but I still haven't forgotten how that slap stung for hours physically and for days emotionally. Stella graduated with decent grades 3 years later and was about to start her first job but couldn't since she found out that she was 6 weeks pregnant at the time. Unfortunately for Stella and her baby, the guy who was supposed to be the dad had graduated already and had returned to his country since he was a foreign exchange student. So, her baby's father wouldn't be in the picture since she couldn't even find him because he blocked her as soon as she told him the news. Now, she was going to have to raise her kid all on her own. At that time, I was 16 and was already working part-time jobs to contribute to the family. But when Stella moved back home pregnant, the pressure started building on me, and my parents started treating me even worse. By then, Sam had already moved out. He'd graduated from college and was working at a restaurant to make ends meet. I'd keep in touch with him and would tell him all about my problems, and he'd try his very best to console me, but that's all that he could do because he had his own life as well. Finally, the baby came along, and a week after that, my mother actually snatched my niece away from me and told me that I didn't deserve to be around her since I was the reason Stella and her daughter had to be cooped up in the tiny living room because I had no shame and continued to live with them despite being told time and again that they didn't want me at all. That was the day that I finally argued back with my mother and told her that I had every right to live in that house because they were the ones who chose to have me. And she told me that similarly, she had every right to say whatever she wanted to me because she brought me into this world and raised me, even though I was an ungrateful brat. She said a lot of other crap that I don't want to repeat, but I knew that day itself that I just had to get out of that damn house somehow. So I packed whatever little stuff I owned and set out to go to Sam's place. He lived in a really small apartment with a roommate and was surprised to see me there, but when I told him that I just couldn't go back anymore and that I couldn't take the mistreatment anymore, he didn't turn me away, even though he knew it would be tough for me. I left just 1.5 years of school anyway, and because I went to public school, it was free of cost, and I could afford to leave my parents' home. It was difficult, I'm not going to lie. We had to live on a tight budget because there's only so much money that a waiter makes, and I was really worried about what I'd do for college as well since I had an aversion to student loans. But then, a week before I graduated high school, a miracle happened. And even when I think about it now, I feel like the universe was just looking out for me all along. Sam's grandparents, his dad's parents, had cut his mother off after his dad's death because of her nasty behavior, which isn't surprising because she is my mom's sister after all. And to retaliate, she denied them any right to keep in touch with or visit Sam, so he lost touch with them after his dad's death, which happened when he was really young. He'd only been able to reconnect with his grandmother, who somehow managed to track him down with the help of her lawyer when she was on her deathbed. His grandfather had passed away a few years after his dad, and the only surviving member was his grandmother, who passed away eventually as well. They'd left him their house, all the money that they'd set aside for him throughout their lives, and a few other expensive items of jewelry. Sam inherited all of it and ended up with a crazy amount of money that neither of us had expected. Of course, he was really sad that he hadn't been able to properly reconnect with his grandmother until she was on her deathbed, but there was finally a solution to all our financial troubles now. We still continued to live frugally and tried to save as much as we could, but Sam took up the guitar again, and I started looking for colleges to go to, which also offered scholarships just to be on the safe side. My grades were great, so I was able to get into a good college, and I'm in my second year currently. I did get a scholarship, and I also have a part-time job as a tutor. Sam took music lessons for a year or so, and after playing a few gigs here and there alongside his waiting job, he managed to land a job as a music instructor at a fancy private school for a much better pay. So right now, we're not exactly rich, but we're doing way better than we used to be, and I'm truly grateful for all the help that Sam has offered me throughout the years. He really deserves this and more. I haven't kept in touch with my parents, but Stella and I never removed or blocked each other anywhere. We never spoke to one another either, though. She hadn't protested or even tried to get me to stay the day I left home, so I didn't think that I had anything left to say to her anyway. I was disappointed but not surprised because even though I did love her and she claimed she loved me too, she never really stood up for me. My niece is a little older than 3, and I've watched her grow on social media, but I haven't been back to see her in person. It was sad, but I come to terms with the fact that this is the most I'd get out of my family and had given up any hope of reconciliation. However, about 3 weeks ago, Stella reached out to me right after I posted that Sam had bought me a new phone. It wasn't very expensive, but it was my birthday, and my old phone was battered, so he got me a new one, and I was excited about it and decided to post it. I didn't expect it to get any reaction at all, but Stella did reach out to me to congratulate me. I thanked her, and I thought that would be it, but she struck up a conversation with me and was being really sweet, so I ended up talking to her for a while. I didn't want to admit it, but I had missed her and my niece, so it felt nice to talk to someone I'd grown up with and was used to. Sam was a great older brother, but our age gap was significant, and he was also just really busy. I loved him, but I also missed my sister and did want to see her one more time. So when Stella asked if I'd be willing to catch up over coffee the next weekend, I agreed without thinking twice, and we met for coffee a couple of days later. She'd brought her daughter along, and I was thrilled to see her, as was my niece.